Welcome everyone to my series, although I'm not sure you can call it a series as I've done this before, where I will be analyzing some rapid games that I played recently. Now, the reason I want to do this, I do feel like that for people who might watch my videos, there is a target market for people, or target audience I should say, my bad, for people who they play rapid but want to get better and they want some insights, and not to be arrogant, but they might appreciate some insights from a player closer to my level. As you can see, I'm rating 2069, and I just want to be able to share that. I don't know this for sure. Maybe no one appreciates it. Well, hopefully someone appreciates it. Maybe no one necessarily finds it instructive. Maybe it's more entertaining. I'm not exactly sure. We'll see where the series goes. I've definitely tried. I've tried like playing the game, like while recording the video, and honestly, I think I just get too distracted. And that could be its own thing in the future. But for now, I just want to do recent analysis. A couple of things. How I'm planning on structuring this is I'm going to alternate. I'm going to show a loss and then a win and a loss. And then if it's a draw, that just won't necessarily count for the alteration. I want to do this just to ensure that I'm not showboating my best games or memeing my demoralizing games or anything like that. I want it to be pretty equal, as I do believe to improve, you do need to both learn from your mistakes and play to your strengths. And also, as you can see, so I have the normal setup, I have the board, player names and things like that. I also do have the engine lines, and I'm open to kind of closing in the future, but I do want to give you some insight as to how I analyze my games, and I do use the engine. There are a lot of purist chess coaches who say that you shouldn't use the engine when analyzing games, and I think if you really want to take your chess seriously and get a lot better, and you want to develop that, then I would encourage you to try some analysis without the engine. But most people don't have the time to just figure out chess, on their own. So, and I figured that 99% of you probably do use the engine at some capacity. If you analyze your games without an engine, please put it in the comments. I applaud you. I've been there, done that before with my tournament games, and it's pretty brutal, but I do think it helped me. So we're going to look at this random rapid game that I played against Stan Russ, who is 21-25. I never remember if these are the pre or post ratings. It doesn't really matter. You get the approximate skill level anyway. My opponent's quite a bit higher rated than me, so this is a good opportunity. So my opponent played the English, which is pawn to c4. Now, I'm sure, you have your weapons against the English. Probably e5 is the sharpest. I've seen some lines with e5, then you just go knight f6 and d5 straight up. So you almost play it like a reverse Sicilian. I'd say that's probably the sharpest. I've seen the symmetrical English, where you just develop both their knights. White also develops both their knights, just something like that. I've seen, I believe, you can play g6. I think this is the Great Snake variation. I had Rat in my brain, but this is the Great Snake variation, where you just try to develop your bishop. And it could transpose into a modern if black just plays d4, and then you go bishop g7, and then just get something like this. It could transpose, which, if you're a modern player, then that could very well suit you. And what I decide to do against the English is, because I play the Queen's Gambit declined as black and against d4, so against d4, I just go d5, and then I just go e6. I've been dabbling some with the Sicilian, not the Sicilian, the Slav, totally different openings. But for the most part, in tournaments and online play, I play the Queen's Gambit declined. So how I approach the English is I just try to go into a very similar setup. And sometimes it transposes. Sometimes when I play e6 on move 1, and not that playing d5 versus some inaccuracy, but I just don't really want to give white the option of taking. It's probably not bad if I play a queen takes. It could transpose, not transpose. Well, would it? A Scandinavian? No, because then the e pawn would have to be out. But it's a similar concept, I guess. I just think that playing e6 is more accurate so that you can just springboard with d5 next. And if white plays d4, then suddenly you just get a queen's gambit declined, and no harm, no foul. However, most English players, especially who are smart, they're not going to play into that. They're just going to play their English opening anyway. So my opponent just played knight c3, but then after d5, my opponent played d4. So I was actually kidding. This actually did happen. So this is the same position as if we had played d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3. And I've had this position many times. And yeah, d4, d5. There we go. Or d5, d4 technically. Now, there are a few ways you can play here. I'm not going to go into like the intricacies of all of them. I play this move bishop e7. I'd say the most common move is knight f6. You could play like a Tarrasch with c5. You could play like a Rogozin with bishop b4. Trying to think if there are any other viable options. I'd say taking's never really good because white can just establish a strong center with e4. I play bishop e7, one, because it's solid, whereas maybe on d6 is not the best square, and b4 could get chased away with a move like a3. Also, the reason I don't really play knight f6, it's a little bit nuanced, but I don't really want to allow a variation that I like to play with white, which is takes, and bishop g5. Now, if I had to estimate, I'd say like a large majority of players probably wouldn't play into this. They'd probably just play like, if I play knight f6, they'd probably just play like knight f3 and then just play more traditional queen's gambit position. I just like playing this better because if they play the exchange, they don't really have the option to go bishop g5, and then I can just chill with something like c6, bishop f5. I forget the exact lines. It's been a while since I studied all this, but anyway, neither here nor there. So my opponent plays g3, and it's becoming apparent that this is similar to a Catalan. It's not quite a Catalan, though, because my opponent did not play knight f3 yet. So a normal Catalan position would be d4, d5, c4, e6. Normally they start with knight f3. And if they go knight f3, I'm fine going knight f6. Then they go g6. Sorry, g3, bishop e7, bishop g2. Now, I've had this position many times. And then, like, normally I would take, and then white just does something, and then this position's been trotted many times, but neither here nor there. What I realized as I was playing the game is that it does look very much like a Catalan, and white is one move away from actually making it a Catalan, but it's not quite a Catalan, so I'm not exactly sure what to do, because their knight has not committed. However, I was like, no big deal, I'll just castle. And then my opponent did not play knight f3. My opponent played e4. And then, yeah, I thought e4 was a bit of a mistake or an inaccuracy as well. I'm not saying that because the computer's saying it, but I just thought that after I take and knight takes, which I did, I took and then knight takes happened. I thought that, like, I played knight b d7. That's what I played. Engine says knight takes e4. Okay, fine. But I just thought that either way, like, say, like, knight b d7, they play, like... This is actually the game variation, which is knight e2 takes, bishop takes, knight f6. And, like, I'm tempoing their bishop. I just wasn't sure what white was, like, accomplishing. Now, the one thing that I had noticed from this position is that I want to play c5, but I was a little bit hesitant about just playing c5. And the reason I want to play c5 is because white has this good center. They have the pawn duo on d and c. And I just want to break that up and just activate my position in the meantime. And, like, if they take, I'm more than happy to just take with the bishop, although apparently queen takes is more accurate. I mean, yeah, they just move their king, and then I would be totally fine with this position. I could even play, like, maybe I play e5 and, like, bishop f5 and, like, open up the position for my rooks and things like that. It could be pretty good for me. And if they do nothing, then I'm content with potentially taking the pawn on d4, trading off one of their center pawns, and then, like, potentially I have the c5 square for myself and things like that. The hesitation I sort of saw with c5 is, like, what if white plays d5? And I'm trying to see this without looking at the engines. This is kind of going to be the start of like my kind of analysis hat rather than my teaching hat, if you will. So I was thinking d5. I thought at the very least I could take, and then like my bishop opens up. Like, yes, they have a passed pawn on the d5 square, but it's not really going anywhere. Yeah, I thought d5 takes. I thought that I could even play, like, I'm trying to remember, like, what exactly I thought. I thought, like, bishop f5 probably, and then, like, it just didn't look all that dangerous, honestly. Like, I didn't really calculate anything specifically beyond that. So, yeah, after d5, and yeah, it does get better for me, and then, like, this is a good variation, then I can just play bishop f5, yeah. And then, like, yeah, he does have a passed pawn, but where's it going? It's not really doing much. So all that actually did happen. I may have not made that clear, but the whole variation with knight takes e4, bishop takes, knight f6, and then c5 happened. My opponent did not play d5 or take, or just play something random like bishop h6. My opponent castled, and here, maybe taking's not like the ultra most accurate, although it is number 2 on the engine lines, so that is probably fine. I really should ignore the engine, honestly. I think I'm focusing too much on it. And sometimes I try to like appeal to the audience with that sort of thing. Don't be that guy who's like, well, you didn't play the top engine move. Why didn't you discuss it? Like, we're not engines, just chill. So I took, which is totally fine. Knight takes. I'll bring up the engine if I see like some swing, like had I play like b6 or something, and then the engine swings, which would like hang a rook, and that would be unfortunate. I highly doubt I'd make a video about that. Oh, funny, the top move is not even taking the rook, it's knight c6. That's so brutal. But anyway, so I played bishop c5 in this position. Now this is where I might at least look at what the engine has to say, because it was pretty much equal here. Then bishop c5, slight inaccuracy. Okay, e5 was better. Yeah, e5 I think I forgot about, and also subconsciously assumed that white could just go knight f5, which that'll happen. I mean, you can see now, like, if they go knight f5, then their knight just hangs, and I'm winning a piece. But sometimes your subconscious just gets you in the way of making, like, objective decisions. So, like, yeah, now if you suggest, like, e5, I do realize, oh, they don't have the f5 square. Because it is ingrained in my brain that if I play pawn to e5, it does allow the f5 square for the knight. But here specifically, it doesn't really work out. And yeah, if I just think logically, if I play e5, these squares don't really seem great. Knight b5, I can just play like a6. And I'm thinking of knight f3. I honestly... Well, bishop g4, they can maybe trade, then take my pawn. Something e5, knight f3. Maybe I just play queen c7, and then just play like rook d8 and harass the queen. Let's see what the variation is. Oh, I do play e4. See, I thought about e4. I just was afraid to suggest it because I thought maybe the pawn could be weak with the bishop attacking it. I say weak. Although, when they play like knight d2... I guess I just play bishop f5. Yeah. Then I'm just holding on to the pawn. Which, again, that just kind of goes to the point of, like, thinking abstractly versus concrete variations. Like, when I was analyzing, I thought, oh, knight f3, if I play e4, then my pawn is weak. Well, let's calculate it. And then if you realize that you're just holding on to your pawn, there are a lot of positional trumps. Like, you just have, like, a pretty decent grip on the light squares, I would say. So, okay, let's go back to the game. I'm not trying to get too sidetracked. So, I played bishop c5. Well, it's not great, apparently, but I'm still fine. Bishop e3, e5. Then now they play knight f5, which was actually genius here because of the bishop. That's actually funny, because here I realized that e5... they hang a knight with knight f5, but then they play knight f5, and for a split second I was like, wait, what? And then I was like, oh. And I calculated either capture, and I thought that if I play like bishop f5, it's one of those things you do want to think about. Like if you have like multiple captures, which one do you do? And sometimes it's even tempting to just take the hanging piece, just make sure that they saw bishop c5, which, I mean, my 21-25 opponent definitely would have seen it. And I just evaluated that after bishop takes knight, bishop takes c5. I just didn't like that their bishop was like, had all this control, and then, oh, I even have a pawn hanging. And like, yeah, if like this happens, they have like both their bishops alive, I'm just like not here for it. Like the top variation, yeah, rook b8, then trade, rook e takes, and then like, yeah, their bishops just dominate my position. It's only +9, but it's a very shaky +9. Like it would be miserable to play. So I made the right choice. I did take on e3. My opponent played knight takes e3. I played queen b6. The idea being to vacate the d8 square for my rook to land on. There we go. To vacate the d8 square for my rook to land on. Queen e2. And here I played bishop to e6, developing my bishop. And I'm also maybe thinking about targeting the c pawn. You never really know. Then here my opponent played knight d5. And so it starts to get interesting because suddenly they have this pressure on your knight, pressure on your queen, and then it's like now you feel forced to do something. I thought that if knight takes, they would just play like pawn takes, and then suddenly it just seems like, yeah, the e5 pawn is hanging anyway. It just didn't seem right to take this way anyway, and that would leave me with bishop takes d5, which is what I did. The other alternative, well, if I just move my queen anywhere, okay, here it would be knight c7. If I just move my queen to like d6 or something, then they would take my knight and they would double my pawns and open my king. I don't need to be allowing that. So the only move for me, the only queen move I have to not double my pawns is queen d8, which I just didn't think was good. I didn't even calculate a variation. I was just like, computer says knight takes, queen takes. Oh yeah, and then the pawn is hanging. That pesky, what do you call it? That pesky Catalan bishop comes into play. So ultimately, I did make the right decision by taking. Then after c takes, I played rook a to d8, which it does give up this pawn. However, I thought that I could get some initiative and then like simplify the position in my favor. I'm just curious what the alternative was. e4. e4 makes sense because taking the pawn would be dangerous because it allows this pin. I assume it's actually pretty bad. Rook f8. Yeah, and then they can't even play like f3 because of this. So yeah, e4 must, again, it comes down to like the subconscious, like abstractly I probably discharged it because of bishop takes e4, but I failed to calculate it. Then like, yeah, I guess if they just try to put pressure, I would just go like rook f8. And then as I mentioned earlier, if this pawn just stays, that's a very strong pawn. So definitely a lesson I can take for the future, hopefully. So I played rook a to d8, which I don't think is bad. Like, I mean, it says plus 0.36, like it's probably drawn if that's the case. Let's see what happened. Queen e5, rook f8. And this I'm pretty sure I saw from afar. So I'm pretty sure, yeah, rook a d8 here, queen f5. So I definitely saw that I could take the pawn. If I play rook f8, I did realize that the queen can't really defend both. So I knew that there was a very high likelihood that I would just get to take the pawn. And if they play queen c3, which apparently is the top move and maintains an advantage, I mean, computer, it's like queen b3, and then what? You just trade into an endgame where they have doubled pawns, but they also have an open rook, and like, let's see, trade. What if I just go like a3? They go rook fd1, and then it's just uncomfortable, I guess. I don't know. But my opponent played queen f5. I took b2, and I did see that like they could just put a rook on the b file and try to pressure me. But I also saw queen e5, which is apparently not correct. I'm supposed to just take a2. But after queen to e5, so this is where I need to do some figuring out on my own. But actually, I do think the game variation did show that. So queen e5, rook e5, rook b7. I calculated this and thought that I was doing fine. And I think, honestly, I only really calculate bishop takes d5. I was like, if they trade, then I just take back. Yeah, I have to take this way because this would hang mate. We don't want to do that. Bishop takes, rook takes. Yeah, and then I was like, I'm doing fine here. Like, they can take a7, but then, I don't know, I go here. I can just give myself luft and then, like, double. Computer says, like, +1. But it's drawn with best play. With best play, that is. I would have to, like, fight for it, but I was pretty confident that I could draw that. I think I neglected to just calculate some variations where maybe they don't have to take the knight. And I did miss a key component, which is that they could play this move rook d1. Oh, sorry, that's not what they played. They played rook takes a7. Then after g6, they played rook d1. And then suddenly, I kind of panicked here because I had a pin to deal with, and there wasn't like a safe way for my knight to like move and protect the rook. Like if my rook was on like, forget this rook. Let's say my rook was on d7. I could play like knight b6. So I'm moving my knight out of the pin while protecting the piece that's about to be captured. But here, there's just not a configuration that I can make it work. Then I was panicking here, and I had 4 minutes and 17 seconds left. And I was like, I don't know what to do. So I just played king g7. And then here, my opponent played rook a5. And in this position, I resigned. Now, with the computer and eval up, you're probably like, what? It's equal. Well, first of all, you have to find the moves to make it equal. It's not always that simple. So yeah, I guess I did spoil it potentially if you saw the evaluation, but either knight b4 or knight c3 draws the game. And the idea is that this is actually fascinating now that I look at it. With either knight b4 or knight c3, you open up both rook's attacks. So if he takes d8, I take a5. And if he takes e5, I take d1. I must have just missed that. I saw the idea. I definitely saw the idea, no doubt about it. I'm trying to remember. Well, I think I was tilted and I just resigned, and I was like, you know, like when you resign, then it shows the eval and it's like 0-0s. You're like Hikaru had that happen in the Speed Chess Championship in one of the games. He didn't resign, but he was defeated, at least so he thought, and he flagged, but he was winning because he had like a winning move. But that was actually kind of funny. But yeah, I think I must have just forgot. Maybe like I forgot that like after like knight c3, I just didn't see like the whole. And it happens. Like sometimes you get so frustrated, and then like they have this pin, and maybe I thought that after knight c3 they had something, and I forgot. Like it happens, and then like you resign, but that's why you never resign. At least play a move and just see what happens. So maybe if I just played like knight c3 out of frustration, and then they took, then I'd be like, oh, I can take, and that's totally fine. So yeah, I resigned in a drawn position. Well, this was the position. And yeah, it's drawn because, like, the end game, like, let's just say, like, knight c3 takes. Let's say maybe takes. Yeah, both those are drawn because I can just round up the a-pawn probably. Well, I can just take it here in this variation. Yeah, and then this is just drawn. Like, even if they could keep their a-pawn, I'm not exactly sure about it. But, all right, well, I imagine this video was quite a bit of rambling, so let me know what you thought of this video, and feel free to give me any feedback, whether it be like the structure of the video. Should I turn the engine lines off? Should I focus less on the engine, more on the engine? Should I don't know, change the board settings where I have like pink and purple color pieces? Like, so let me know what you think, and while you're at it, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to this video. we're trying to make a YouTube comeback, but I've also probably said that on at least 5 separate occasions. So we'll see what happens. Just for now, whenever I have time, I'm more than happy to pump out some content. And with that said, I'll see you for the next video, whenever that may be. Bye.